Question 1, scenario question. Mr. Johnson is an animal control officer who receives a complaint about a dog roaming freely in a local park. Upon arriving at the park, he finds a medium-sized dog that appears stressed and is behaving aggressively, barking at passers-by and showing signs of heightened anxiety. The dog does not have an identification tag and seems to be alone without any obvious owner in sight. Mr. Johnson approaches the dog, cautiously making sure to use the appropriate protective gear. However, the dog lunges towards him aggressively. What should Mr. Johnson do next to ensure the safety of both himself and the dog, while also complying with animal control procedures? A. Immediately restrain the dog using a catch pole to prevent further aggression. B. Call animal services to handle the situation, as the dog appears to be too aggressive to manage alone. C. Attempt to calm the dog down by speaking softly and using slow movements before attempting to restrain it. D. Use a tranquilizer dart to subdue the dog. Answer. C. Attempt to calm the dog down by speaking softly and using slow movements before attempting to restrain it. Explanation. In this scenario, Mr. Johnson should first attempt to calm the dog down before taking any aggressive actions to restrain it. Using slow movements and speaking softly may help reduce the dog's stress and anxiety, making it less likely to lash out. According to animal control guidelines, are calm and patient approaches, especially when dealing with an aggressive or frightened animal. If the dog continues to show aggression despite these efforts, then further actions such as using a catch pole or calling additional assistance may be necessary. The use of a tranquilizer dart, option D, is generally reserved for more extreme situations and may pose additional risks to the animal's welfare and public safety. Calling animal services, option B, may not be necessary unless situation escalates, but an experienced officer like Mr. Johnson should ideally be prepared to handle the dog initially. Question 2. Which of the following methods is considered most appropriate when identifying a lost or impounded dog to ensure the animal's safe return to its rightful owner in line with animal control best practices and legislation? A. Checking for microchip and looking for collar or tag with the owner's details. B. Scanning the dog for microchip and documenting the animal's physical characteristics for identification purposes. C. Immediately photographing the dog and posting it on social media to find the owner. D. Using collar with unique identification number and assuming ownership after set period of impoundment. Answer. B. Scanning the dog for a microchip and documenting the animal's physical characteristics for identification purposes. Explanation. Under animal control best practices, the most effective method of identifying lost or impounded animals is to scan for microchip. If no microchip is found, documenting the animal's physical characteristics such as breed, size, color, and any distinct markings is vital for later identification. Matching with lost pet reports. This process complies with both ethical and legal animal control practices, ensuring that lost animals can be reunited with their rightful owners. Checking for collar or tag, option A, is useful, but microchipping provides more reliable, long-term method of identification. Posting on social media, option C, can be helpful but is not primary identification method according to animal control guidelines. Option D, assuming ownership after set period, is not legal or ethical in many jurisdictions, as owners must be given time to reclaim their pets. Question 3. Which of the following actions is recommended when responding to a public complaint about a dog behaving aggressively towards people in a residential area? A. Immediately issue a fine to the dog's owner for allowing the dog to be off-leash in public area. B. Approach the dog cautiously to assess its behavior and take appropriate action if it poses an immediate risk to public safety. C. Take the dog into custody without assessing the situation and relocate it to shelter. D. Ignore the complaint unless the dog has bitten someone or caused physical harm. Answer. B. Approach the dog cautiously to assess its behavior and take appropriate action if it poses an immediate risk to public safety. Explanation. When responding to a public complaint about an aggressive dog, it is important to approach the situation with caution and assess the dog's behavior before taking any drastic action. Animal control officers should evaluate whether the dog poses an immediate threat to public safety or if it is simply exhibiting fear-based aggression. If necessary, the officer may then decide to implement appropriate containment, such as using a catch pole or calling for additional resources. Immediate fines, option A, may not be appropriate without first assessing the situation and verifying the circumstances. Taking the dog into custody without proper evaluation, option C, could be premature and may not be necessary unless the dog poses a clear and immediate risk. Ignoring the complaint, option D, is a failure to fulfill the officer's duty to ensure public safety and animal welfare. Question 4. You have been called to investigate a case involving a dog suspected of being neglected and left in poor conditions in a residential area. Upon arrival, you observe the dog is visibly malnourished, has an untreated wound, and is chained to a post without access to food or water. Based on animal cruelty laws and your responsibilities as an animal control officer, which of the following actions is the most appropriate course of action? A. Immediately seize the dog and take it to a shelter for treatment, then issue a citation to the owner. B. Inform the dog's owner about the conditions and ask them to improve the dog's situation before proceeding with further actions. C. Observe the dog for a few days to ensure the conditions worsen before intervening. D. Provide the dog with food and water, then leave notice for the owner to contact the authorities. And so A. Immediately seize the dog and take it to a shelter for treatment, then issue a citation to the owner. Explanation. Under animal cruelty laws, animal control officers are obligated to intervene in situations where animals are being neglected or mistreated. This includes cases where animals are malnourished, injured, or left in unsafe conditions. Option A is the most appropriate response as it addresses the immediate welfare of the animal by ensuring it is taken to a shelter for medical treatment and care. Following this, a citation can be issued to the owner for neglect. Option B is insufficient in this case because neglect is a legal violation and should not be tolerated. Observing the situation, option C, is not appropriate when clear signs of neglect are present. Simply providing food and water without addressing the underlying issue, option D, does not fulfill the officer's legal responsibilities. Question 5. You are asked to assess a situation where a dog has been found roaming in a public park without supervision. The dog is wearing a collar, but there are no identification tags. What is the best course of action according to animal control procedures? A. Impound the dog immediately and begin the process of finding the owner through shelter records. B. Allow the dog to continue roaming in the park if it doesn't seem dangerous and leave note with the local animal shelter. C. Wait for the dog to approach you and attempt to leash it before calling animal control services. D. Take the dog home and care for it until you can determine the owner. Answer A. Impound the dog immediately and begin the process of finding the owner through shelter records. Explanation. The most responsible and lawful course of action when encountering a dog roaming without supervision is to impound the animal for its safety and to begin efforts to reunite it with its owner. According to animal control policies, any stray animal should be impounded and processed through proper records to check for identification such as micrage or prior shelter history. Allowing the dog to roam, option B, is unsafe for the dog and the public. Option C can be dangerous for both the dog and the officer, especially if the dog is anxious or aggressive. Taking the dog home, option D, is not appropriate as it poses a liability issue and does not follow legal procedures for handling stray animals. Question 6. During a routine patrol, you come across a group of teenagers who are handling a stray dog in a way that appears unsafe as they are pulling at the dog's leash aggressively and the dog is showing signs of distress. What should you do as an animal control officer to handle this situation? A. Immediately fine the teenagers for mishandling the dog and seize it for further evaluation. B. Intervene by calmly approaching the situation, explaining proper handling techniques and safely securing the dog. C. Take the dog away from the teenagers and send them on their way without further interaction. D. Ignore the situation unless the dog is showing signs of physical injury or aggression. Answer. B. Intervene by calmly approaching the situation, explaining proper handling techniques and safely securing the dog. Explanation. As an animal control officer, your role includes educating the public on safe and humane animal handling. In this case, option B is the best course of action as it allows you to intervene by calmly explaining to the teenagers how to properly handle the dog, reducing its distress and preventing harm. But securing the dog in a safe manner ensures its well-being. Finding the teenagers, option A, may be excessive without first educating them on proper handling. Simply taking the dog, option C, without addressing the inappropriate behavior does not resolve the issue or promote education. Ignoring the situation, option D, could lead to further distress for the animal and potential injury. Question 7. A local animal shelter is reporting an increase in animal abandonment cases and you have been assigned to investigate the potential causes. Based on your knowledge of animal control legislation and public behavior, which of the following is the most effective strategy to reduce animal abandonment in your community? A. Increase fines for pet owners who abandon animals, making the penalty more severe. B. Launch an educational campaign targeting pet owners to inform them about responsible pet ownership and the consequences of abandonment. C. Enforce stricter laws for pet registration, making it more difficult for pet owners to give up their animals. D. Focus on increasing the number of impounded animals, which will deter others from abandoning their pets. Answer: B. Launch an educational campaign targeting pet owners to inform them about responsible pet ownership and the consequences of abandonment. Explanation: while increasing fines, option A, may serve as a deterrent, the most effective long-term strategy for reducing animal abandonment is education. By launching an educational campaign, option B, you can increase awareness about responsible pet ownership, the importance of proper care, serious consequences of abandonment. Educating pet owners can change attitudes and reduce the number of abandonment cases. Option C, enforcing stricter pet registration laws, may not address the root cause of abandonment, which is often a lack of awareness or inability to care for an animal. Focusing on increasing impounded animals, option D, may exacerbate the issue rather than resolve it. Question 8. A dog has been reported as causing frequent disturbances in a residential area, such as excessive barking during late hours, but no signs of abuse or neglect have been identified. As an animal control officer, what is your first step in addressing this situation in accordance with public nuisance laws and animal behavior principles? A. Immediately seize the dog and take it to a shelter to remove it from the environment. B. Visit the property to assess the situation, observe the dog's behavior, and speak with the owner about the complaint. C. Find the owner for disturbing the peace without further investigation. D. Ignore the situation as there are no signs of abuse or neglect. Answer: B. Visit the property to assess the situation, observe the dog's behavior, and speak with the owner about the complaint. Explanation: when dealing with a nuisance complaint, the first step is to assess the situation thoroughly. As an animal control officer, you must visit the property to observe the dog's behavior and have a conversation with the owner to understand the underlying causes of the disturbance. This approach aligns with the principles of conflict resolution and public relations. Seizing the dog, option is a drastic measure and should only be taken if the animal's welfare is at risk. Issuing a fine without investigation, option C, is not appropriate as it bypasses due process. Ignoring the situation, option D, would be irresponsible as ongoing disturbances could escalate and lead to more significant issues. Question 9. You are conducting an investigation of a dog involved in a biting incident where the dog allegedly attacked a person after being provoked. What is your primary responsibility in handling this case? A. Immediately euthanize the dog to prevent any further incidents. B. Investigate the circumstances surrounding the bite, interview witnesses, and evaluate the dog's behavior before determining any further action. C. Charge the dog's owner with criminal neglect regardless of the situation. D. Only take action if the bite resulted in significant injury to the victim. Answer: B. Investigate the circumstances surrounding the bite, interview witnesses, and evaluate the dog's behavior before determining any further action. Explanation: in cases of dog bites, it is crucial to conduct a thorough investigation to determine the full context of the incident. The officer should evaluate whether the dog was provoked and assess its behavior and history of aggression. Interviewing witnesses is essential to gather accurate information. Immediate euthanasia, option A, is not justified without a complete assessment. Charging the owner with neglect, option C, without investigating the circumstances is premature and could be unjust. Action should be taken based on the findings of the investigation, not solely on the severity of the injury, option D, as some bites may result from provocation or miscommunication rather than inherent aggression. Question 10. You are responding to a complaint about an animal that has been continuously barking at all hours of the day and night, causing a disturbance in the neighborhood. After arriving at the property, you notice the dog is well fed and seems to be in good health. What should you do next? A. Immediately issue a citation for disturbing the peace and recommend that the owner take action to stop the barking. B. Investigate the cause of the barking, talk to the dog's owner, and recommend solutions such as increased exercise or behavioral training. C. Take the dog into custody and place it in the shelter for the owner's failure to manage the barking. D. Leave the property without taking any action since the dog appears to be healthy and well fed. Answer: B. Investigate the cause of the barking, talk to the dog's owner and recommend solutions such as increased exercise or behavioral training. Explanation. In this case, the dog is not showing signs of abuse or neglect, and the issue is related to nuisance barking. The best course of action is to investigate the cause of the barking, which could be due to boredom, lack of exercise, or anxiety. By talking to the owner and recommending solutions such as increased exercise, environmental enrichment, or professional behavioral training, you can address the root cause of the issue. Issuing citation, option A, or impounding the dog, option C, would be premature without first attempting to solve the issue through education and intervention. Question 11. A report comes in regarding a dog that was left outside during extreme weather conditions with no shelter or access to warmth. Upon investigation, you observe the dog is visibly shivering and the temperature is dangerously low. What should you do in this situation? A. Immediately remove the dog from the property. Take it to a shelter and issue a citation to the owner for neglect. B. Provide the dog with food and water, then leave. A notice for the owner to improve the situation. C. Wait for the owner to return before taking any action. D. Inform the owner of the law and ask them to make the dog comfortable before leaving the property. Answer A. Immediately remove the dog from the property, take it to a shelter and issue a citation to the owner for neglect. Explanation. Extreme weather conditions such as dangerously cold temperatures pose a significant threat to an animal's health and safety. As an animal control officer, your primary responsibility is to ensure the well-being of the animal, which in this case involves removing the dog from the hazardous environment and providing it with warmth and medical attention if needed. The owner should be cited for neglect, as leaving an animal outside in such conditions is a violation of animal welfare laws. Simply providing food and water, option B, or waiting for the owner, option C, would not adequately address the immediate danger the dog is in. Question 12. A concerned citizen calls in a complaint about a dog that is often seen limping in the yard. Upon visiting the home, you observe the dog walking with a slight limp but otherwise appears to be healthy and active. What should you do in this situation? A. Impound the dog and take it to the shelter for an evaluation. B. Advise the owner to take the dog to the vet for a thorough checkup and ensure the injury is addressed. C. Issue a citation to the owner for neglecting the dog's injury. D. Leave the property, as the dog does not appear to be in immediate danger. Answer B. Advise the owner to take the dog to the vet for a thorough checkup and ensure the injury is addressed. Explanation. While the dog is limping, it does not appear to be in immediate distress, and there are no visible signs of neglect or abuse. The best course of action is to advise the owner to take the dog to the vet for an evaluation to determine the cause of the limp and whether medical treatment is necessary. Impounding the dog, option A, is unnecessary unless injury is severe or there is evidence of neglect. Issuing a citation, option C, would also be premature without further investigation. Simply leaving the property, option D, would ignore the opportunity to educate the owner on the importance of seeking veterinary care for the dog's well-being. Question 13. You receive a call about a potential case of animal hoarding. Upon arrival, you find a residence with an excessive number of cats and dogs in overcrowded and unsanitary conditions. The animals appear to be malnourished and stressed. What should be your first step in addressing this situation? A. Immediately seize all the animals and take them to a shelter for care. B. Conduct a thorough investigation, document the living conditions, and speak with the owner about the situation before determining further action. C. Issue a citation for the unsanitary conditions and leave the property. D. Provide the animals with food and water and recommend the owner clean the house. Answer B. Conduct a thorough investigation, document the living conditions, and speak with the owner about the situation before determining further action. Explanation. Animal hoarding cases are often complex and require careful investigation to ensure the proper course of action is taken. As an animal control officer, you must first assess the living conditions, document the situation, and speak with the owner to understand the circumstances. Many are unaware of the severity of their actions, and the goal is to intervene appropriately while offering education or assistance. Immediate seizure, option A, may be necessary if the animals are in imminent danger, but it is important to conduct a full assessment first. Issuing a citation, option C, or merely providing food and water, option D, without addressing the root cause of the hoarding is not sufficient. Question 14. You respond to a complaint about a dog that has been chained in the yard for several days with no food or water. Upon arrival, you observe the dog appears dehydrated and lethargic. What should be your immediate course of action? A. Leave the dog and issue a citation to the owner for neglect. B. Seize the dog immediately, take it to a shelter for medical care and file a report on the conditions. C. Provide the dog with food and water, but do not take further action. D. Wait for the owner to return before taking any action. Answer: B. Seize the dog immediately, take it to a shelter for medical care and file a report on the conditions. Explanation: in cases where an animal is clearly suffering due to neglect, such as dehydration and lethargy, immediate action is necessary. Seizing the dog and ensuring it receives medical attention. A shelter is the most responsible course of action. A report should be filed to document the conditions and begin legal proceedings against the owner. Necessary: simply issuing a citation, option A, without addressing the immediate need for care would be inadequate. Providing food and water, option C, without removing the dog from the situation is not enough to ensure its safety, and waiting for the owner, option D, may delay necessary intervention. Question 15. You receive a report about a dog that is frequently roaming the streets without a leash and appears to be aggressive towards passers-by. Upon locating the dog, you observe it is untagged, but it seems healthy and is not actively attacking anyone. What should be your next step in handling the situation? A. Immediately capture the dog and impound it in the shelter until the owner is identified. B. Leave the dog where it is, as it does not seem to be causing any immediate harm. C. Attempt to safely contain the dog, check for identification, and contact the owner if possible. D. Issue a citation to the dog's owner for failure to restrain the animal even if the owner is not present. Answer: C. Attempt to safely contain the dog, check for identification, and contact the owner if possible. Explanation: the primary goal when encountering a roaming dog, especially one that may exhibit aggressive tendencies, is to ensure the safety of both the animal and the public. Attempting to safely contain the dog, option C, while checking for identification tags or microchip, allows you to determine the dog's ownership. If the owner can be contacted, can resolve the issue without the need for impoundment. Impounding the dog, option A, should be reserved for cases where safety cannot be assured or the owner is unidentifiable. Simply leaving the dog where it is, option B, could pose a risk to public safety, and issuing a citation, option D, without confirming ownership would be premature. Question 16. While investigating a report of a dog bite, you discover that the bite occurred in a public park where the dog was off leash. The victim reports the dog was acting aggressively without provocation. The owner of the dog claims the bite was due to the victim's sudden movement, which startled the dog. What is the first action you should take in investigating this incident? A. Immediately issue citation to the dog owner for allowing the dog to be off leash in public area. B. Take the dog into custody for quarantine to check for rabies and conduct an investigation into the circumstances of the bite. C. Contact the local animal shelter to report the incident and let them handle the investigation. D. Ask the victim to fill out witness statement and file the report without further action. Answer: B. Take the dog into custody for quarantine to check for rabies and conduct an investigation into the circumstances of the bite. Explanation: when dealing with a dog bite, especially in a public area, the immediate priority is public safety and ensuring that rabies protocols are followed. By taking the dog into custody for quarantine, option B, you can monitor the animal for signs of rabies and conduct a thorough investigation into the cause of the bite. The circumstances of the incident, including whether the dog was provoked, need to be examined, and witness statements should be collected. Issuing a citation, option A, before understanding the full context of the bite could be premature. Simply contacting the shelter, option C, or filing the report, option D, without taking action to safeguard public health is insufficient. Question 17. A local shelter is overwhelmed with animals, and they have requested your assistance in responding to a potential hoarding situation. When you arrive at the property, you find a large number of dogs and cats living in unsanitary conditions with limited food and water. Some animals are visibly injured. What should be your first action in addressing this situation? A. Immediately remove all the animals from the property and transport them to the shelter. B. Conduct a thorough assessment of the situation, document the conditions, and speak to the property owner before taking any action. C. Issue a citation to the owner for neglect and allow them to continue caring for the animals. D. Leave the property and wait for the owner to voluntarily relinquish the animals. Answer: B. Conduct a thorough assessment of the situation, document the conditions, and speak to the property owner before taking any action. Explanation: in cases of suspected hoarding, a careful, methodical approach is essential. The first step is to assess the conditions thoroughly, documenting everything for legal purposes. The animal's welfare must be prioritized, and it's important to gather information from the property owner to understand whether they are willing to make improvements or if more drastic measures, such as removal, will be necessary. Immediate removal, option A, might be warranted if the animals are in immediate danger, but usually it is better to assess the situation first. Issuing citation, option C, without fully understanding the extent of the neglect or hoarding is premature. Waiting for the owner to relinquish the animals, option D, may leave the animals in distress for too long. Question 18. You are investigating a case where a dog was found severely malnourished and emaciated in a backyard. The owner claims that the dog has been eating regularly but refuses to allow you to take the dog to the vet. The owner states they have been feeding the dog dry kibble, which they claim is adequate for its needs. Weighs your course of action. A. Allow the owner to keep the dog and monitor the situation as the owner has provided food. B. Seize the dog, take it to the vet for immediate care and issue a citation for neglect. C. Leave the property and recommend that the owner visit a veterinarian for a checkup. D. Allow the dog to remain in its current environment with additional monitoring. Answer. B. Seize the dog, take it to the vet for immediate care and issue a citation for neglect. Explanation. Malnourishment and emaciation are clear indicators of neglect, and the dog's condition requires immediate intervention. As an animal control officer, it is your responsibility to ensure the animal's well-being, and in this case, the dog needs immediate veterinary attention. The owner's refusal to take the dog to the vet and their claim that dry kibble is sufficient for the dog's needs does not justify the animal's condition. Seizing the dog, option B, ensures that it receives the necessary care. Simply monitoring the situation, option D, or advising the owner to visit vet, option C, would not address the immediate needs of the animal. Question 19. During a routine inspection of a local pet store, you observe several animals in small, overcrowded cages with limited access to clean water and food. The cages are not properly ventilated, and some of the animals appear distressed. What action should you take? A. Immediately close the pet store and seize all animals. B. Advise the store owner to improve conditions and give them a time frame for compliance. C. Issue a citation for poor conditions and recommend the animals be removed from the store. D. Leave the store as the conditions are not immediately life-threatening and can be resolved later. Answer. C. Issue a citation for poor conditions and recommend the animals be removed from the store. Explanation. In this situation, the animals are clearly living in poor conditions that could negatively affect their health and welfare. As an animal control officer, you have the authority to issue a citation for violating animal welfare laws related to overcrowding, inadequate food and water, and poor ventilation, recommending that the animals be removed. Options allows you to take steps toward improving their conditions. Simply advising the store owner, option B, without issuing a citation or taking more concrete action could allow the problem to persist. Immediate closure of the store, option A, is not warranted unless the animals are in immediate danger, and leaving the store, option D, without action is not responsible. Question 20. You receive a complaint about a barking dog that has been disturbing the neighborhood late at night. Upon investigation, you find that the dog is left outside in an enclosed yard but is not being properly supervised. The dog seems anxious but does not appear to be in immediate distress. What is your next step in addressing the issue? A. Issue a noise violation citation to the dog's owner. B. Recommend that the owner bring the dog inside during the night to prevent further disturbances. C. Immediately take the dog into custody for lack of supervision and investigate further. D. Leave the property and monitor the situation for a few days to see if the barking continues. Answer. B. Recommend that the owner bring the dog inside during the night to prevent further disturbances. Explanation. While the dog may be barking due to anxiety or being left outside, the immediate solution is to recommend to the owner that the dog be brought inside during the night to reduce disturbances. Option B. This approach addresses the barking issue without escalating the situation prematurely. Issuing a citation, option A, may be appropriate if the disturbance persists after the recommendation, but the goal should first be to correct the situation through communication. Taking the dog into custody, option C, is unnecessary unless the animal is in immediate danger. Monitoring the situation, option D, could delay necessary action. Question 21. During a routine inspection of a pet shop, you notice several rabbits housed in small cages with no access to proper exercise areas. The cages are dirty, and some of the rabbits appear to be ill. The shop owner claims that they do not have the resources to provide better conditions due to financial constraints. What should you do next? A. Issue a fine and allow the shop owner to continue operating while making improvements. B. Seize the rabbits and close the shop immediately for failure to provide proper care. C. Provide the shop owner with a warning and a deadline to improve the conditions. D. Notify the local animal welfare organization and leave the shop to allow the owner to make changes. Answer: C. Provide the shop owner with a warning and a deadline to improve the conditions. Explanation: in this situation, while the conditions are inadequate, the first step should be to provide the shop owner with a clear warning and a deadline to address the issues. Option C. This allows the owner an opportunity to improve the situation before more drastic measures such as seizing the animals are necessary. Issuing a fine. Option A, or immediately closing the shop. Option B, should only occur if the owner fails to comply with the warning. Simply notifying an organization. Option D, without taking direct action, could delay necessary improvements for the animal's welfare. Question 22. You are investigating a complaint about a dog that has been left chained outside for extended periods of time. The dog appears thin and has a raw patch on its neck from the chain. The owner claims they only leave the dog outside for a few hours each day and that the dog is well fed. What should be your course of action? A. Allow the dog to remain with the owner, but recommend using a longer chain. B. Take the dog to a vet immediately to assess its health and remove it from the owner's custody if necessary. C. Issue a citation for chaining the dog without providing adequate shelter and food. D. Leave the property and allow the owner to continue their current care routine as the dog is not in immediate danger. Answer: B. Take the dog to a vet immediately to assess its health and remove it from the owner's custody if necessary. Explanation: the dog's condition, including its thinness and raw patch from the chain, suggests it may be suffering from neglect. Taking the dog to a veterinarian for immediate care. Option B is the best course of action to address the health concerns. The chain itself is likely contributing to the injury and discomfort, and the dog's well-being must be prioritized. Simply recommending longer chain. Option A, or issuing citation without taking immediate action. Option C would not address the dog's current suffering. Leaving the dog with the owner. Option D could result in continued neglect. Question 23. While responding to a report of a stray dog in a neighborhood, you find a dog that is frightened but not aggressive. The dog has no collar or tags and it appears to have been on the street for some time. What is the appropriate next step? A. Take the dog to the nearest shelter and file a report in case the owner comes forward. B. Leave the dog in its location to see if it returns home on its own. C. Call animal control for assistance and wait for them to take action. D. Try to coax the dog into your vehicle and return it to the owner immediately. Answer A. Take the dog to the nearest shelter and file a report in case the owner comes forward. Explanation: in this case, since the dog is astray and there is no identification, the best course of action is to take the dog to the nearest shelter. Option A. This ensures the animal is safe and can be cared for, while also providing an opportunity for the owner to reclaim the pet. Simply leaving the dog. Option B, or waiting for animal control. Option C, leave the animal in a vulnerable situation. Trying to coax the dog into your vehicle. Option D could put both you and the animal at risk, especially if the dog is frightened. Question 24. You receive a report of an animal that has been abandoned in a vacant house. Upon arriving at the location, you find a cat that appears to have been left behind. It is hungry and dehydrated but not injured. What should you do next? A. Leave the cat in the house and contact animal control to come pick it up later. B. Immediately remove the cat from the property, provide food and water, and take it to a shelter. C. Issue a citation to the property owner for abandonment and leave the cat where it is. D. Contact the previous owner to check if they plan to return for the cat. Answer B. Immediately remove the cat from the property, provide food and water, and take it to a shelter. Explanation: abandonment of an animal is a serious issue. The best course of action is to immediately remove the cat from the property to prevent further suffering. Option B. Providing the cat with food and water and taking it to a shelter ensures it receives proper care. Simply leaving the cat. Option A, or issuing a citation. Option C does not address immediate welfare of the animal. Contacting the previous owner. Option D might be useful later, but the cat's well-being must be prioritized in the moment. Question 25. You are investigating a case where a dog has been reported to be excessively barking for hours every day. The owner claims that the dog is left outside for its own comfort. Upon inspecting the dog's living conditions, you find that the dog is living in an enclosed yard, but there is no shelter or shade provided, and the dog appears distressed in the heat. What is the appropriate action you should take? A. Issue fine for excessive barking and leave the situation unresolved. B. Recommend the owner provide proper shelter and shade for the dog and monitor the situation. C. Take the dog into custody and transport it to an animal shelter due to its distress. D. Allow the owner to continue with their current routine as long as the dog is not being neglected in other areas. Answer. B. Recommend the owner provide proper shelter and shade for the dog and monitor the situation. Explanation. While the dog's distress due to the lack of shelter in the heat is concerning, the first step should be to educate the owner on their responsibility to provide appropriate living conditions for the dog. Option B. The owner should be informed of the need for shelter and shade, and the situation should be monitored to ensure compliance. Taking the dog in custody, option C, may be considered if the situation does not improve or if the dog's distress escalates. Issuing fine, option A, is premature without first providing chance for the owner to remedy the situation. Allowing the owner to continue the current routine, option D, could result in continued harm to the dog. Question 26. You respond to a report of a potential animal abuse case involving a cat. Upon arrival, you find the cat with visible injuries that seem to be consistent with neglect. The owner claims the cat had an accident, but there are signs of malnutrition and untreated wounds. What should be your course of action? A. Allow the owner to continue caring for the cat after providing them with a warning. B. Immediately remove the cat from the home and take it for a veterinary examination. C. Issue a citation for neglect, but allow the owner to retain the cat for the time being. D. Notify local animal welfare organizations and leave the case unresolved for now. Answer. B. Immediately remove the cat from the home and take it for a veterinary examination. Explanation. The visible injuries and signs of malnutrition indicate potential abuse or neglect. The immediate priority is to remove the cat from the situation and ensure it receives the proper veterinary care it needs. Option B. This step is crucial to address the animal's immediate health and welfare concerns. Simply warning the owner, option A, or issue citation, option C, without removing the animal from harm would be inadequate. Notifying local organizations, option D, may be necessary, but removing the animal should be the first priority to prevent further suffering. Question 27. A local farmer reports that several of their chickens have gone missing from their farm. Upon investigation, you discover that the fence around the chicken coop is damaged and there are signs of a possible predator attack. What should be your first step in this situation? A. Set traps around the property and wait for the predator to be caught. B. Investigate the possibility of theft and question the farmer about the security of their farm. C. Notify local wildlife control to handle the situation. D. Advise the farmer to repair the fence and monitor the situation. Answer. D. Advise the farmer to repair the fence and monitor the situation. Explanation. The first step should be to address the immediate issue of the damaged fence, as this is a potential entry point for predators. Option D. Recommending that the farmer repairs the fence will prevent further losses and provide a long-term solution. Setting traps. Option A might be considered if the predator is still active, but the first priority is to secure the farm. Investigate theft, option B, and contacting wildlife control, option C, may be necessary if the damage and losses continue, but repairing the fence should be the initial focus to prevent further harm. Question 28. You are conducting a random inspection of an animal shelter and find several dogs that appear to be suffering from untreated medical conditions. Some of the dogs are visibly ill, but there are no medical records available for these animals. What should be your next step in handling this situation? A. Leave the shelter without further action, as it is not your responsibility to provide medical care. B. Immediately report the situation to the shelter management and allow them to address the issue. C. Take the dogs into custody, transport them to a veterinary clinic and investigate the shelter's practices. D. Issue a citation for inadequate record keeping and allow the shelter to rectify the issue over time. Answer. C. Take the dogs into custody, transport them to a veterinary clinic and investigate the shelter's practices. Explanation. The lack of medical records and the presence of sick animals in the shelter indicate possible neglect. The appropriate course of action is to take the dogs into custody and transport them for immediate veterinary care. Option C. This ensures the animals receive the treatment they need and allows you to begin investigating the shelter. Practices for potential violations: simply reporting the situation, option B, or issuing citation, option D, without addressing the immediate health needs of the animals would not be sufficient in this case. Leaving the shelter without action, option A, would be neglecting your duty to ensure the animals' welfare. Question 29. You receive a report about a feral cat colony that is causing problems in a residential area. The cats are scavenging through garbage and have been seen approaching people. There are concerns about the health and safety risks they pose to the community. What is your best course of action? A. Leave the cats alone, as they are wild animals and should not be disturbed. B. Set up traps to capture the cats and transport them to a shelter or relocation site. C. Contact local wildlife management to take care of the situation. D. Advise the community to ignore the cats and allow nature to take its course. Answer: B. Set up traps to capture the cats and transport them to a shelter or relocation site. Explanation: feral cats can present both health and safety risks to the community. The best course of action is to set up traps to safely capture the cats and transport them to a shelter or appropriate relocation site. Option B. This method ensures the cats are handled humanely while also addressing community concerns. Simply leaving the cats alone, or advising the community to ignore them, option D, would allow the issue to persist. Contacting wildlife management, option C, may be an option, but animal control officers are typically better equipped to manage this type of situation. Question 30. You are called to a rural property where a dog has reportedly been left chained outside for extended periods. The dog appears agitated and is unable to move freely. Upon inspecting the area, you find that the chain is short, causing the dog to be confined to a small area without shelter, water, or food. The owner claims they were unaware of the dog's distress and argues that the dog enjoys being outside. What should be your next step? A. Issue a fine for improper tethering and advise the owner to provide food and water. B. Leave the situation as is, as the owner claims the dog enjoys being outside. C. Immediately remove the dog from the property, taking it to a shelter and inform the authorities. D. Advise the owner to lengthen the chain and provide shelter, food, and water, then monitor the situation. Answer: C. Immediately remove the dog from the property, taking it to a shelter and inform the authorities. Explanation: tethering a dog for extended periods, especially with no access to shelter, water, or food, constitutes neglect. In this case, immediate action is required to prevent further distress to the animal. Removing the dog from the situation, option C, and ensuring it receives the necessary care is the priority, while educating the owner. Proper care of pets is important. The dog's immediate welfare takes precedence, especially considering the potential for harm or suffering. Simply issuing fine, option A, or advising the owner to provide care, option D, without removing the dog could lead to further neglect. Leaving the situation as is, option B, would allow the abuse to continue unchecked.